and welcome back to Ghostly Q&A. I'm your host, Nancy Gillen. Last week, if you missed the episode, we talked about presidential ghosts, George Washington, Abe Lincoln, and even the sexy JFK. Well, this week we're going further back in time, to Athens, Greece, BCE, back when chariots and strappy sandals were all the rage. This week we are introducing philosophers Socrates, Aristotle, and even Plato. So, to get started, follow me upstairs to the attic where all the ghosts hang out.
The man who laid the groundwork for Western systems of logic and philosophy, Socrates!
Well, you've already been introduced big time, but just for the sake of it, I know you, they know you. What's your name and what does it mean?
Yes, my name is Socrates, but it means whole rule.
Alright, what about your nickname, sir? I'm sure everyone knows the main one, but let's figure out, do you have more than one nickname?
Well, my nicknames are Father of Western Philosophy, and probably others, but I'm not sure. I just know I'm the father of Western philosophy.
Alright, well, since you are a ghost, tell us when you were born and how you died.
I was born in 470 in Athens, Greece, and I also died in Athens, Greece in 399 due to hemlock poisoning.
Now what about family? Everybody's a family guy, right?
Well, my mother was a midwife back in Athens, Greece, and my father, Sophroniscus, he was a mason, and he taught me everything. Well, not everything, but everything I learned before I learned things. And then I have a wife and I have kids. I have 3 of them, but you could Google them because I doubt if you'd know how to say their names.
What about a big philosopher like you? Do you believe in God?
Well, no, I choose ethics over religion, actually, so no God for me.
Well, what happens in Greece doesn't always stay in Greece. So, what's your sexuality, big guy?
Thank you for asking. Of course I love my wife, and I have 3 children with her, but I actually do like men. So, I'm bi, but I like them for their souls and their minds and how much they could understand and learn things.
What other jobs did you have besides being a great thinker?
Actually, I was a soldier when I was very young, and then I decided I wanted to learn, and so I learned, and I became a teacher, so being a teacher was my full-time job.
Please, tell us the tea. Who is your most famous student?
Well, my most famous student of all was Plato, of course, and Plato ended up teaching Aristotle, and Aristotle ended up teaching Alexander the Great, so technically, those are all of my students, because they all learned from me.
Now tell us, what are your most famous books and teachings?
Well, my most famous teaching was the Socratic technique, which was how to argue, which is really good for debates and whatnot, so. But I actually never wrote a book. Every wisdom and thought that I had was passed on to my students, and they brought it out and went on with the world, so I never wrote a book.
Big man, can you please describe yourself in 3 words? This should be interesting.
I would probably have to say first, intelligent, and legend.
Well, it's been wonderful chatting here with Socrates, so let's have him end his segment with a quote.
Well, this is a hard one. I have many. I know that I know nothing.
Thank you so much. Now to introduce our next ghost.
Student of Socrates, but teacher of Aristotle, Plato, the middleman.
You certainly made a name for yourself after being taught by Socrates. So what does your name mean?
Everyone knows me as Plato, but my real name is Aristocles, which means the best glory.
So what about your nicknames? Do you have any?
Well, my nickname is Plato, which means broad-shouldered, or also wide forehead.
Well, tell me about where you were born and even how you died.
I was born in the year 428 BCE, and I died in my sleep the year 347 BCE.
Now, do you have any family?
My father and mother were very far distant relatives of royalty, which is pretty cool. And I never had a wife or kids because I was too busy.
Well, Socrates isn't a big God fan, are you?
Yes, actually, Socrates didn't believe in God, but I do. I think he's transcendent, just above everything and everyone else.
You believe in God? What about sex?
Well, I think people should only do it to procreate. The highest relationship, in my humble opinion, would be between two homoerotic men who love each other very dearly but don't do anything. Actually, the word platonic comes from my name and my teachings.
That's interesting. So, did you have any other jobs?
Well, I was a soldier in the Peloponnesian War, and then I came to Athens and created the academy, and around 385 BCE, and I became a teacher and a philosopher.
Now, who are your most famous students?
My most famous students would probably be Dionysius II and, of course, young, arrogant Aristotle.
Now, Plato, can you please tell us what are your most famous teachings and books?
My most famous would probably be The Republic, which is about a society run by philosophers, and it's the quarrel between poetry and philosophy. And my other one, The Sophist, is about the metaphysical question of being and not being.
Would you mind describing yourself in 3 words?
That is a good question. I would say broad, teacher, and celibate.
And as always on this show, can you please end your segment on a quote?
Well, books give a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything.
Thank you so much, Plato. As always, it was wonderful to have you here. Coming up next, the man, the myth, the legend, we have one of the most well-versed and knowledgeable people to ever exist, Mr. Aristotle. Aristotle is a busy man, and he could not make the attic, so he is in the basement. Well, how about it, big guy? What does your name mean? Well, of course, my name is Aristotle, and it means the best. Well, that's interesting. How about your nicknames? I've heard you had quite a few. Well, I have many nicknames, including Father of Biology, Rhetoric, Zoology, Political Science, and the Man Who Knew Everything. All right, legend. Well, tell us about your birth and your death, if you will. I was born in the year 384 BCE, and I died because of a stomachache. Kind of a loser way to go, but in 322 BCE. Do you have any family relations? Well, sadly, both of my parents died when I was young. That's why I was at school for 20 years. But then I married Pythias and had a daughter with her named also Pythias. And my wife died, and so I married Heracles, and my son's name with her is Necromantis. Tell me, how do you feel about God? Well, personally, I don't believe in the Greek gods, but I do believe that there is a God, and he's an intellect, and he created everything, so, yeah. So, what about your sexuality? I would probably go with straight. Boring. Okay, what about your jobs? Well, I'm an all-around scholar. I taught, I wrote, I studied the land, the sky, the animals. Well, you're certainly famous. Do you have any famous students? Well, I taught many famous kings, like Alexander the Great, Ptolemy, and even Cassander. Well, most of us already know, but could you please tell us your most famous books or teachings? Well, almost all of the stuff I did was kind of famous, but I guess if I had to put them in order, I would say logic, science, ethics, poetry, theater, metaphysics, and, well, life. You seem to be a pretty creative guy. Do you mind describing yourself in 3 words?
Well, if I had to choose, probably the greatest ever.
And this time we have an extra question for the extra cool guy. What are your views on the Greek polis?
I am glad you asked. I even had it written down. Exercise of law is essential to make sure all people are unified and so people can agree with one another.
And finally, to end his segment, a quote.
I love this question. No great mind has ever existed without a touch of madness.
Well, that was something. As usual at Ghostly Q&A, we always end in front of the fish tank. I hope you enjoyed learning about philosophy and the greats who created it. But first, before we go, here's a quick word from our sponsors. Math History, St. Andrews AC UK, DiscoverWalks.com, Britannica.com, Global.oop.com/Plato and same-sex sexuality, YourStory.com/quotes from Plato, Goodreads.com, quotes from Aristotle, Ways of Discourse and Ways of Life, author I. Kai Jing, The Intimate Relationship of Life and Law in Aristotle's Policy, author Walter Brogren. Thanks for watching, and next week tune in for Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Jim Morrison. We'll see you later.